We spend so much time worrying about the food we eat or the water we drink. But what if one of the single biggest threats to our brain health is something we do constantly, every single second, without even thinking about it? Yep, I'm talking about breathing. Today, we're going to explore a really surprising and, frankly, pretty scary connection between the air all around us and our risk of developing dementia. So, to really get a sense of what's at stake here, let's start with this number 55 million. Just let that sink in for a second. That is how many people right now are living with dementia around the world. It is an absolutely massive number, and the World Health Organization says it's on track to nearly triple by 2050. This isn't just a health issue, it's a full-blown global crisis. Now, we know a lot of the usual suspects when it comes to dementia risk, right? Things like age, your genes, lifestyle choices. But what if a huge piece of the puzzle has been hiding in plain sight this entire time? An invisible threat that we are all exposed to every single day. And that's really the core question we're digging into here. Is the very air we breathe silently damaging our brains? To really wrap our heads around this, we've got to look at the whole picture of the dementia crisis. It's not just a health problem for individuals, it's a massive challenge for our economies, too. The economic weight of this is just hard to even imagine. Back in 2019, the global cost of dementia was already pegged at $1.3 trillion, with a T. And that's set to more than double by 2030. You can see how this impacts everyone, families, healthcare systems, you name it. So what causes it? Well, we know some of the big risk factors. Things like being over 65, smoking, diabetes, they're all on the list. But now, scientists are pointing to something new, something that affects pretty much all of us: air pollution. Okay, so let's talk about the air itself. Just how bad is it? And what exactly is in it that has scientists so worried? Get ready for a stat that's going to blow your mind. 99%. That's right. The WHO says that virtually the entire world population is breathing air that's considered unsafe. This isn't a them problem happening somewhere else. This is an us problem. All of us. So what is all this stuff in the air? Well, a prime suspect is something called particulate matter, or PM for short. You can think of it like a cocktail of microscopic bits of soot, dust, and liquid droplets just hanging in the air. And here's the really crucial part. When it comes to these particles, size is everything. The smaller they are, the deeper they can get into your body, and the more dangerous they become. Let's break that down. The bigger particles, PM10, they get stuck in your upper airways. No good, but manageable. The smaller ones, PM2.5, can get way down deep into your lungs. But the really, really tiny ones, the ultrafine particles, whoa. They are so small they can slip right through the lining of your lungs, get into your bloodstream, and, this is the scary part, they can cross the blood-brain barrier. That's the brain's main security wall. So these tiny invaders can get past our body's defenses. But how exactly? How do they make that journey into our most protected organ? It turns out they have a couple of ways in. Okay, so pathway number one is through the lungs, like we just talked about. They get into the blood and travel all over, eventually finding a way to sneak into the brain. But there's a second route, and it's much more direct. It's basically a superhighway straight to your brain, right up the nose. The particles can travel along your olfactory nerve, your Snell nerve, and go directly from the air into your brain tissue. And once they're in, it's bad news. These particles can just wreak havoc. They cause neuroinflammation. Think of it like a constant low-level fire that never goes out. They cause oxidative stress, which is basically like your brain cells rusting from the inside. They can even directly damage your DNA. And maybe most alarming of all, they've been shown to help build up the very same sticky proteins like amyloid beta that are the classic hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease. So we know these particles are bad, we know how they get in, and we know what they do. But is there one particular type that's the worst of the worst? Let's play detective and look at the evidence. When scientists pulled together all the research, they looked at a whole lineup of pollutants. And while some, like nitrogen dioxide, look potentially harmful, one bad guy really stands out from the pack. The strongest, most consistent link between a pollutant and a higher risk for dementia belongs to PM2.5. Yep, those are the tiny particles we talked about that can get deep into our lungs and our bloodstream. And hey, don't just take my word for it. This quote from a big review of the science in 2024 says it all right there. The evidence is pointing right at PM2.5 as public enemy number one for our brain health. Okay, that is a pretty bleak picture. But it's not all doom and gloom. A huge source of this pollution is traffic. So what if there's a technology that can stop this threat right at the source? Let me introduce you to the gasoline particle filter, or GPF. It's a pretty clever device that gets installed in a car's exhaust system, and its job is super simple but super important. It physically captures and removes those nasty PM particles before they ever get out of the tailpipe. So, does it actually work? Oh yeah, it works. Big time. In one study, they tested a car with and without a GPF. The difference was just night and day. Without the filter, tons of tiny particles. But with the filter, an 80% reduction. It just physically strips most of them out of the exhaust. But here's the million-dollar question, right? It's great that you can reduce the number of particles, but does that actually translate into less damage to our bodies? Does cleaner exhaust actually mean healthier cells? Well, the answer seems to be a huge yes. In a lab, scientists took human lung cells and exposed them to both kinds of exhaust. With the regular, unfiltered exhaust, the cells showed a lot of DNA damage. But when they used the exhaust that had been cleaned by the GPF, the damage dropped significantly. So there you have it. That's the connection. Using a filter like a GPF doesn't just clean up the exhaust pipe, it directly reduces the kind of cellular damage, that rusting we talked about, that's linked to all sorts of long-term health problems, including the kind of inflammation we see in neurodegeneration. So let's put all the pieces together. We've seen that the science is strong. PM 2.5 air pollution is linked to a higher risk of dementia. We know these tiny particles can get into our brain and cause the same kind of damage found in Alzheimer's. And we now know that real existing technology, like a GPF, can slash these emissions, and that doing so directly reduces harm at the cellular level. Which brings us to our final thought. The technology is here. The science is becoming clearer every day. We have tools that can make a real difference right now. So the biggest question left isn't really about science or engineering. It's about us. If we have the ability to make our cars cleaner, what would finally take for us to decide to make our air cleaner for everyone?